You're stepping on my foot again. Unless your secret plan is to kill me slowly, maybe try watching where you're going." His voice cut through the music like a knife, half annoyed, half teasing. I wanted to vanish through the hardwood floor. My sneakers were clumsy, my palms damp, and the weight of his gaze sharp, unyielding, devastatingly handsome burned through every layer of my skin. This was my life now, fumbling in a dance studio in downtown Manhattan, under the merciless supervision of Gabriel Torres, the man who was both my nightmare and, God help me, the reason my heart had been betraying me night after night. Gabriel wasn't just any dance teacher. He was a former professional ballroom competitor, the kind of man who walked into a room and instantly bent gravity around him. Confidence dripped from him like sweat on his temples, and his voice carried that impossible mix of command and charm. People listened to him because they couldn't not. I, on the other hand, was a 23-year-old college dropout who had signed up for this dance class on a dare from my roommate. "You need to loosen up," she'd said. "Besides, you might meet someone." I had rolled my eyes, and then I met Gabriel. From the very first lesson, something in me shifted. It wasn't just the way he moved fluid, precise, like he had rewritten the laws of physics to obey him. It was the way he looked at me when I stumbled, as if he could see through my awkwardness, past my fumbling hands and stiff shoulders, and straight into the part of me I tried hardest to hide. My fear, my longing, my secret. And God, did he exploit it? Again! Gabriel snapped his fingers. The music started over, a sultry tango vibrating through the studio walls. He stepped closer, pressing his palm lightly against my back. "Breathe here. You're too rigid. Dancing isn't math, it's not about being right, it's about surrendering." Easy for him to say. My brain was screaming surrender, but my body was locked in survival mode. His hand on my back was fire. His breath against my cheek when he leaned in was chaos. And I hated him for making me feel so much. I hated him even more for how much I wanted it. One night after class, I stayed behind to practice. Everyone else had left, the mirrors reflecting only me and my clumsy shadow. I replayed the music from my phone, moving through steps I could barely hold together. And then he appeared, leaning against the doorway like he owned not just the studio but the whole damn city. "You don't listen, do you?" His smile was crooked, tired but amused. I froze mid-step. "Sorry, I was just practicing." He walked toward me, each step echoing on the wood. "Or torturing the floorboards?" I scowled, heat rising in my face. "You don't have to stay. Maybe I want to." His eyes locked with mine in the mirror. For a second, something unspoken flickered there, softer than his usual arrogance, more dangerous than his sharp tongue. And then he was behind me, his hands guiding my arms into place, his chest brushing my back, his voice low in my ear. "Stop fighting yourself, Daniel. Let the music move you. Trust me." Trust him. That was the beginning of my downfall. The truth was, I didn't know how to trust anyone. Growing up in Ohio with a father who thought dancing was for weak men, and a mother who swallowed her silence like medicine, I learned early to shrink myself, to stay invisible, to bury the parts of me that might cause trouble. But Gabriel wouldn't let me stay small. Every correction, every smirk, every lingering touch pulled something raw and restless out of me. I wanted to hate him for it. But instead, I found myself craving every second he spent near me. Weeks passed. Our lessons grew more intense. He demanded more, pushed harder, forced me to confront the rhythm not just in my body but in my blood. And with each passing night, the distance between us narrowed physically, emotionally, dangerously. One evening, during a particularly brutal rehearsal for the class showcase, I stumbled again. He caught me by the waist, his grip strong, steadying. Our eyes met. The room fell silent, even the music fading into background noise. Something broke in me, or maybe it was released. "You make it impossible to focus," I whispered, breathless. His jaw tightened, his fingers lingering at my waist longer than they should have. For a heartbeat, I swore he was about to kiss me, and then he stepped back, his mask snapping into place. "Then focus harder." It hurt more than I expected. The showcase arrived faster than I was ready for. The theater was crowded, the stage lights brutal, my nerves chewing me alive. Gabriel stood backstage with me, adjusting his tie, radiating effortless confidence while I shook like a leaf. "Don't embarrass me out there," he said flatly. I snapped my head up. "Is that all this is to you? A performance?" His eyes softened, just for a second. "No," he said quietly, and then louder, more firm. "But tonight, it has to be." We walked on stage. The music started. We moved. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about steps or mistakes or my father's voice in my head telling me I was wrong to be here. I was thinking about Gabriel's hand in mine, the way his body commanded mine into rhythm, the way the audience vanished into nothing. It was just us. And in that moment, in front of hundreds of strangers, I realized I was in love with him. But love, I would soon learn, was the most dangerous dance of all. That night after the performance, applause still ringing in my ears, Gabriel disappeared. No congratulations, no sly smile, no whispered praise. Just gone. I waited. For hours. My phone stayed silent. And when he finally did call, days later, his words shattered me. "This can't happen, Daniel. Whatever you're feeling, it's not real. You need to stop." I laughed bitterly, though my chest burned. "You think I can just switch it off? After everything? Then learn." His voice cracked, just enough for me to hear the truth under the lie. "Because I can't be what you want." The line went dead, and I stood there in my tiny apartment, phone in hand, realizing that for the first time in my life, I didn't want to shrink anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. But wanting something and fighting for ethos are two very different things. I didn't see Gabriel for 2 weeks. Not at the studio. Not at the cafe across the street where he usually grabbed his espresso after class. Not even on social media, where he had once posted endless clips of his dancing, each video a cruel reminder of how flawless he was. It was like he'd vanished. And with his absence, the city felt sharper, louder, emptier. I still went to class, though. I showed up, dragged myself through rehearsals with the substitute instructor, and pretended I wasn't unraveling inside. But every mirrored wall screamed his absence. Every song replayed his voice in my head, and every misstep reminded me that the one man who had made me feel alive had also slammed the door shut in my face. "Are you okay?" My roommate, Jess, asked one night when she found me staring at the ceiling, still in my dance shoes. I laughed, hollow and bitter. "Do I look okay?" She sat beside me, pulling my phone out of my hand before I could refresh his profile for the millionth time. "You don't even like dance that much," she said softly. "You like him." It wasn't a question, and it was the truth. One night, after too much whiskey and too little sleep, I finally worked up the nerve to go looking for him. Jess had mentioned hearing rumor she taught private lessons in a fancy studio uptown, the kind with chandeliers and velvet curtains. It was a world away from our gritty downtown floors. I told myself I was just going to talk, to get closure, to demand answers. But the second I saw him alone in that gleaming studio, moving across the floor with a grace that made my throat tighten, I knew I was lying to myself. Because closure was the last thing I wanted. "Daniel." His voice startled me. He had stopped mid-spin, his chest rising and falling, sweat shining on his forehead. "You shouldn't be here." "Then why didn't you answer me?" My voice cracked. I hated how desperate I sounded. "Why did you just disappear?" He dropped his gaze, his hands flexing at his sides. "Because this isn't what you think it is." I took a step closer. "Then tell me what it is. Because I swear, Gabriel, I'm losing my mind trying to figure it out." His eyes met mine, and for a flicker of a second, I saw it. The same fire that burned in me, the same hunger he'd tried to bury under discipline and control. But then he shook his head, turning away. "You're my student. That's all." Felt like a slap. I should have left. I should have walked out of that golden room, saved what little dignity I had left. But instead I laughed. A raw, jagged sound. "You can lie to me, Gabriel, but don't you dare lie to yourself." I felt it. Every time you touched me, every time you looked at me, Don't tell me I imagined it. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, and then before I could even blink slammed his fist against the mirror. The glass trembled but didn't break. His breath came heavy, ragged. Do you think this is easy for me? His voice was a growl, torn from somewhere deep. You think I don't want? He cut himself off, dragging his hands over his face. Christ, Daniel. You don't understand what this could cost me. That was when I realized the truth. This wasn't about me. It wasn't about whether he felt something did. I could see it in every trembling muscle, every fractured word. It was about fear, his career, his reputation, his walls built so high he didn't know how to climb down. And me? I was the risk he couldn't afford to take. I left that night with my chest caving in, rain soaking through my jacket as I stumbled back into the city. But instead of breaking me completely, something inside me hardened. If Gabriel was too afraid to admit what we had, then I'd prove it to him. I'd prove to him that love wasn't weakness. That maybe, just maybe, we both deserved more than silence and shame. The chance came sooner than I expected. Our class had been chosen to perform at a local festival, something small, community-driven, but still public. A chance to show off our work. The substitute teacher announced it casually, but I saw the flicker in her eyes when she added, Gabriel will be leading the choreography. He was back. My heart stopped. The day of rehearsal, I walked into the studio and there he was, as if nothing had happened. Crisp black shirt, hair tied neatly, eyes sharp and unreadable. The room buzzed with chatter, students thrilled to see him again. But for me, the air was razor thin, every breath cutting deep. When his gaze finally landed on me, it lingered just a second too long. A silent acknowledgement of everything we hadn't said. And then he clapped his hands. Let's get to work. Rehearsals were brutal. Gabriel pushed us harder than ever. His commands sharp, his corrections merciless. He never singled me out, never let his hand linger, never allowed even a hint of softness. But late at night, when the others had left and the studio was emptying, I caught him watching me. Just watching. As if he couldn't look away. And in those stolen moments, I knew. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't kill what was between us. The festival day arrived. A blur of lights, laughter, food stands, music drifting through the warm summer air. Our group waited backstage, nerves buzzing, costumes clinging to our skin. I tried not to look for him. I tried to keep my head down, focus on the steps. But when Gabriel walked by, giving last-minute notes, his hand brushed my shoulder. Just once. Just enough. And suddenly I was burning. We took the stage. The music pulsed. We moved as one. And when my turn came, when Gabriel partnered with me for the solo he'd choreographed, I forgot the crowd, the lights, the risk. It was just us, locked in rhythm, the world shrinking until there was nothing left but the sound of his heartbeat echoing mine. For one dangerous second, our eyes met. And the look he gave me was not the look of a teacher at his student. It was hunger. It was fear. It was longing so raw it stole my breath. The crowd erupted in applause. But all I could hear was the silence between us. Afterward, chaos. Congratulations, laughter, sweaty hugs from classmates. I smiled, I nodded, I pretended to be fine. But the moment I stepped outside into the cool night, I felt him behind me. Daniel. I turned. He stood under the streetlight, tie loosened, shadows carving sharp lines into his face. You were incredible, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. Don't do that. Don't praise me like I'm just some student. Not after everything. He exhaled, stepping closer. You don't understand. No, Gabriel. I do. You're afraid. Afraid of what people will think. Afraid of what it means. But I'm not. Not anymore. The rain started again. Soft at first, then heavier, soaking into our clothes. I didn't move. Neither did he. And then finally his mask cracked. His eyes closed, his lips parted, and he whispered like it was a confession he'd been dying to release. I want you. The words nearly buckled my knees. But before I could respond, he shook his head, stepping back. I shouldn't have said that. The door slammed shut again. And as I stood there, rain dripping into my eyes, I realized we were trapped in a dance with no end, two men circling each other, drawn and repelled, desperate and terrified. But sooner or later, one of us was going to break. And I wasn't about to let it be me. For days after that night in the rain, Gabriel vanished again. It was almost laughable, how predictable he'd become. Step forward, retreat, confess, deny. A dance of shadows and silence. Only this time I wasn't willing to play along. I showed up to the studio anyway. I practiced until my knees screamed, until sweat blinded my eyes, until exhaustion was the only thing quiet enough to drown out the sound of his voice echoing in my head. But the truth was simple. No matter how much I tried to pretend, every beat of music, every flicker of movement reminded me of him, of us. And if he thought he could run forever, he was wrong. The breaking point came one Saturday evening. The studio was supposed to be closed, but I had a key Jess had sweet-talked out of the manager. I wanted to be alone, to burn myself into the floor with every step. But when I pushed open the door, he was already there. Gabriel. Alone. Shirt clinging to his chest, hair damp, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. He froze when he saw me, the air between us sharp as glass. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. I dropped my bag, meeting his gaze. "Neither should you." We stood like that for what felt like hours, music pulsing faintly from the speakers. Finally, I crossed the room, my footsteps echoing against the wood. "Stop running," I whispered. He flinched, just slightly. "Daniel." "No. Don't say my name like that if you're just going to push me away again." My voice cracked, tears threatening. "You think you're protecting me, but all you're doing is breaking me." His hands curled into fists, his jaw clenched, and then he snapped. In 2 long strides, he was in front of me, grabbing my wrist, dragging me closer until I could feel his breath against my lips. "You don't know what you're asking for," he hissed. "If anyone found out, if the studio knew, if the board me career would be over. Everything I built, gone. And what about me?" My voice shook. "What about what I feel? What I've been carrying alone because you're too afraid to admit it? Do I not matter?" His eyes burned, pain and desire colliding in the space between us. "You matter too much," he whispered. The kiss came like a storm. 1 second we were staring at each other. The next his mouth was on mine, desperate and unyielding, years of fear and silence unraveling in a single, stolen moment. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I melted into him like I'd been waiting my whole life for this exact touch. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't patient. It was fire. And for the first time, Gabriel wasn't my teacher, wasn't my tormentor. He was just a man who wanted me as badly as I wanted him. When we finally broke apart, gasping, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a mistake," he whispered, though his arms refused to let me go. "Then let it be the best mistake we've ever made," I whispered back. For weeks after, we lived in stolen fragments, late-night practices that turned into confessions, lingering touches disguised as corrections. His hand brushing mine under the cover of darkness. My head on his shoulder when the world outside the studio felt too heavy. It was fragile, dangerous, but it was ours. And yet, no matter how many times he kissed me, no matter how often his voice softened when he said my name, I could feel the fear still in him. A ticking clock, waiting to tear us apart. The explosion came sooner than I expected. One of the senior instructors, a bitter man named Clark, who had never liked Gabriel, walked in on us one evening. We weren't even kissing, just too close, his hand on my hip as he guided me through a turn. But the look in Clark's eyes said everything. By the next morning, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers in hallways, glares in the break room, the subtle shift of people pulling away from me in class. And Gabriel, he shut down. Where he'd once been fire, he was now ice. His words clipped, his gaze cold, his touch gone entirely. It was like the kiss, the confessions, the nights we'd spent breathing each other in, one of it had ever happened. I tried to confront him after class, cornering him in the back hallway. "Are you seriously going to pretend like we're strangers again?" He didn't look at me, didn't even slow down as he shoved papers into his bag. "It's better this way. No, it's easier this way for you, because you don't have to face what you feel." My chest ached with every word. "But don't stand there and tell me it's better, Gabriel. Not after everything." Finally, his eyes snapped to mine, blazing. "Do you think I don't wake up every damn day wanting you? Do you think this doesn't kill me too?" I froze. "Then why?" My voice cracked. "Why throw it all away?" "Because love doesn't pay rent," he spat. "It doesn't keep a roof over my head. It doesn't save me when the world decides I'm not good enough. And it sure as hell won't save you when they drag my name through the dirt." His words were knives. And worse, they were lies, because I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe them any more than I did. The fight left me hollow. For days, I drifted through the city like a ghost, music blaring in my headphones but never reaching me, my body moving through routines without meaning. But the more I replayed his words, the more one thing became clear. He wasn't afraid of the world. He was afraid of himself. And if I didn't push back, if I didn't fight for us, then I would lose him forever. The final confrontation came the night of the gala. The studio was hosting a grand event, celebrating years of performances, donors, everything that made their world glitter. Gabriel was at the center of it, dressed in a suit that made him look untouchable, a drink in his hand, his smile sharp and fake. I almost didn't go, but Jess shoved me into my best jacket and told me if I didn't fight for him, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So I went. And when I saw him across the room, surrounded by people who admired him for everything but the truth of who he was, I snapped. I walked straight up, grabbed his hand, and pulled him onto the dance floor. He tried to resist, tried to murmur something about appearances, about propriety. But the second the music started, his body betrayed him. We moved together, instinct taking over, the rhythm binding us like it always had. And in the middle of that crowded room, under the glow of chandeliers, I whispered, "I'm not afraid. Not of them. Not of this. The only thing I'm afraid of is losing you." His breath caught. His steps faltered. For the first time, Gabriel Torres, the man who commanded every room he walked into, looked lost. And then, slowly, painfully, beautifully, he let go. His hand tightened on mine. His eyes softened. And in front of everyone, he kissed me. Not desperate, not stolen, but real. And for the first time, we weren't hiding. The aftermath was chaos, gasps, whispers, Clark storming out in disgust. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. Because when Gabriel pulled back, his forehead pressed to mine, his voice shaking, he whispered the words I'd been dying to hear. "I love you." And this time, he didn't take them back. After the gala, nothing was the same. The studio board was furious. Rumors spread. Donations were threatened. Clark stormed out and never returned. For days, the air was heavy with scandal, every hallway buzzing with whispers. But Gabriel didn't run this time. He stood in the middle of the storm, shoulders squared, voice steady, and for once, he didn't deny me, didn't deny us. When questions came, when accusations hissed through clenched teeth, he simply said, "Yes, he matters to me." And for the first time, I saw him not as untouchable, not as a man chained to fear, but as someone brave enough to fight. It wasn't easy. Sponsors pulled back. The board suspended him from teaching, pending review. For weeks, it looked like everything he had built might collapse. And yet, somehow, in the middle of that chaos, we found peace. Mornings became ours. He'd come over with bagels and coffee, his hair still messy, his smile softer than I'd ever seen in the studio. We'd sit on the floor, sunlight painting patterns on our skin, talking about everything and nothing. Nights, we danced in empty rooms, not for an audience, not for approval, but for ourselves. No pressure, no perfection, just movement, laughter, and the simple truth of being together. For the first time in my life, I wasn't dancing to prove something. I was dancing because with him, it felt like breathing. One evening, weeks after the gala, he confessed something that broke me and healed me all at once. We were lying on my couch, his head on my chest, the hum of the city outside my window. "My father was a soldier," he murmured. "The kind of man who believed strength was silence. Who believed love like this was shameful. I spent my whole life trying to be what he wanted. And when he died, I thought if I kept running, maybe I'd finally be free of him." I stroked his hair, my throat tight. "But you weren't." He shook his head. "I was just trapped in a different kind of prison. One I built myself." I kissed the top of his head, holding him tighter. "Then let's tear it down. Together." He looked up at me, eyes shining with something raw, something unguarded. "You're too good for me, Daniel." I laughed softly, brushing his lips with mine. "No. I'm just finally good enough for myself." And then I kissed him until neither of us could breathe. Eventually, the board reached their decision. Gabriel wouldn't be reinstated as lead instructor. The scandal was too loud, the donors too unforgiving. But instead of breaking him, it freed him. He opened his own studio downtown, smaller, humbler, but alive with possibility. Jess designed the flyers. I painted the walls with him until our hands ached. And when the first students walked through the door, I saw something in his smile I had never seen before. Joy. Not the polished mask he wore for approval. Not the sharp grin that hid his fear. But joy real and unfiltered. And it was contagious. On opening night, he pulled me onto the floor. In front of our students, our friends. In the middle of that tiny studio with its scuffed mirrors and fresh paint, we danced. Not the tango. Not the practiced routines he'd drilled into me. Just us. Moving, laughing, stumbling and catching each other, hearts beating in sync. And when the music slowed, he kissed me. Not as my teacher, not as my secret, but as the man who had finally chosen me. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The world moved on as it always does. There were still whispers sometimes, still glances that lingered too long. But they no longer pierced me, no longer pierced him, because we had built something stronger than fear. One morning, a year after it all began, I woke to find him already awake, sitting at the window with a notebook in his lap. "What are you writing?" I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. He smiled, sheepish. "A new routine. For us." I sat beside him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Another performance?" "No," he said softly, closing the notebook and taking my hand. "For life, because that's what this feels like with you. A dance that doesn't end when the music stops." And I knew in that moment that no matter how many times we stumbled, no matter how messy the steps, we'd always find our rhythm again. Together. Looking back, it's almost funny. I walked into that studio a clumsy kid, terrified of myself, terrified of being seen. And somehow, through sweat and heartbreak and too many tears, I found the one person who made me stop hiding. Gabriel Torres. My teacher. My torment. My love. The man who taught me that balance isn't about perfection, it's about trust. About leaning into someone else and knowing they'll catch you. And as I stand beside him now, watching our students fill the studio with laughter and music, I realize something simple. He was right all along. Dancing isn't about being right. It's about surrendering. And for the rest of my life, I will keep surrendering again and again into his arms. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.